Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I'm Callum, aka Political, and I'll be your host this evening. I'm joined this evening by Turn Left's Lewis Aaron. Lewis, how are you this evening?
I'm all right. Struggling to keep up with all the news. It's a crazy news week, so been doing a lot of reading.
Yeah, anything good?
No, it's all very depressing.
Oh,
That's the easiest way to put it. No, nothing good is happening right now. Nothing
great.
good is coming out. But we'll try and find some optimism in it all. Maybe we'll see.
We'll see. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Lewis. Now, before we begin, we just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you to all of our followers and supporters for your support. Turn Left is still a voluntary organisation, and if you want to help us grow, you can do so in many ways. You can donate to us via our website at turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can make a one-off donation, or you can give us regular support there too. If you can't afford to help us financially, we totally understand. So please don't if you can't afford it. But you can also support us by liking our content, interacting with our videos, and sharing our content with your friends. We'll be reading some of your comments later in the show, so please join the conversation, as we always love to hear what you have to say. Now, on the show this evening, welfare fraudsters could find themselves banned from driving if they fail to repay their debts in what the government is describing as the biggest fraud crackdown in a generation. From Nazi salutes to radical left bishops, we'll be discussing the explosive first few days of Trump's second term in the White House. And Southport killer Axel Rudikabana has been sentenced to 52 years in prison this afternoon in Liverpool Crown Court. Now, for our first story. People accused of committing benefit fraud could be stripped of their driving licences in a bid from government to enact what they call the biggest fraud crackdown in a generation. The new Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill will give the government the power to suspend people who owe debts of £1,000 or more to the DWP from driving, provided frequent requests to repay the debt have been ignored. The bill also gives governments the power to recover money directly from someone's bank accounts if they are not on benefits and not paid through PAYE. Now, Liz Kendall, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, said, "We are turning off the tap to criminals who cheat the system and steal law-abiding taxpayers' money." Now, the government say that this bill will save the DWP £1.5 billion over the next 5 years. But, Lewis, I can't help but think that this is just another plan to go after vulnerable people to appeal to a certain type of voter. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been obviously generations and decades of obviously certain types of media. We know who we're talking about, who have constantly attacked people who are benefit frauds, who are these lazy people. We know all the usual rhetoric, and that has actually helped in many ways in terms of obviously the right wing. And this is like vitriol that's constantly used against, Labour is a socialist welfare state, the lefties, all this type of stuff. And it just seems like another move for Labour to try and appeal to their right-wing voters, which is a losing game. It just seems like one of those other tactics. I'm not sure if that's where you're coming from it, or do you think they're just wanting to be really financially responsible and just want to get this money back?
I think it's interesting that the big announcement is benefit fraud rather than tax fraud, right? I think it's interesting that that's the sort of the route they're going down going down with this. The fact that they're talking very loudly about the benefit aspect of this as well tells me that they're trying to appeal to a particular type of voter. What gets me with this though is that, well, there's a couple of things. So some campaigners have talked about the fact that recently, I think it was just a few years ago, many carers were caught up in a scandal where they were all getting told they had to repay the carers allowance because they had worked maybe an hour or so more than they were supposed to in order to be eligible for it. And as a result, the DWP were like, nope, we're clawing all of that back. Now, those people that are in that situation, people that are looking after vulnerable people and who are, working as well and getting carers allowance, and they, sometimes we work a little bit more than we're supposed to. Sometimes you put an extra hour of overtime in. It's easily done. It's not deliberate. They're not fraudsters that are trying to steal all this money from the system. They're just genuine people that they got asked to do an extra hour at work and they did. And then all of a sudden they're getting told that they're no longer eligible. They owe all this money back. And I think what concerns me, the first point, is that people like that are going to be targeted by this as well. And
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Oh, sorry, were you finished? My bad. I thought you froze them for a second.
it's all right. Go for it.
No, yeah, this is the same. I used to the college that I used to go to. I remember a famous story from the what's their name? Is it the chaplain? Like he was like the religious counselor at the school. I went to a
Yeah.
Catholic college, and I remember him, coming in one day, and I had a meeting with him, and he was furious because he just received a letter from DWP saying that he owed £5,000 in child benefit because they realised over so many, literally a ridiculous amount of years, that they were just overpaying him, but only slightly, but to add up to over a decade's worth of money worth thousands. And obviously, again, it's not like they want it all at once, but at the same time, when it comes down to this type of penny pinching and trying to recover it when it's their mistake, I would understand. I did also have a friend who accidentally got paid £10,000 in their first payment as some weird mistake about 10
Wow.
years ago from DWP for it was like out of work allowance or something. And obviously in those cases, yeah, okay, that give it back. Okay, it makes sense. But this idea of going after people who may have, uh, been overpaid or maybe claimed something for slightly longer than they should have,
Mhm.
perhaps, maybe in lots of different situations, it just seems like the most ridiculous type of penny pinching.
Yeah.
And what we know as well, when it comes to actually taking these people on and the resources that it requires, it costs a lot of money. I'd love to see in the analysis, because it's not there, they're talking about how much they're going to recover. How much is this going to cost? Because it's the same with so many different types of situations when it comes to, yeah, maybe money is owed, but like the cost to go and get it back is also negligible as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people as well may not know that they're committing benefit fraud, which is absolutely possible. There are
Mhm.
people who, pay like the bedroom tax, for example, and their child moved out 6 months ago, and suddenly they realize they should have been paying the bedroom tax.
Mhm.
It's situations like this where people are technically committing benefit fraud in lots of ways, but they just simply don't know it. So going after these people are just ridiculous.
What do you make of the whole driver's license thing? Because the way that it's worded and the way that they've set it out is that it would only apply if you'd have to owe more than £1,000, firstly, and multiple attempts to recover that money would have to have been made before they could appeal to the courts to basically have
Mm.
your driving license suspended. But what worries me about that is if you've got someone who's already struggling to pay back a debt, but they drive, and you take that away from them, they might need to. I mean, in my job, I literally have to drive. I work in social research and I go from place to place. And if I've not got my driver's license, I cannot do my job, which means I can't earn money. So how are those people supposed to pay back those debts?
Yeah, threatening people like this is just absolutely not the way to go. If money needs to be recovered for actual, genuine, full on criminal benefit fraud, which there have been cases, some very famous cases actually, where people have purposely done criminal levels of benefit fraud. However, when it comes to, again, the more menial cases, it just doesn't make sense to go after people like this because, as you said, it could cut them off from a lifeline that they need. It
Mhm.
could, in many instances as well, if they, there's instances where people may not change their addresses. And can you imagine if somebody owes accidental £1,500, a letter's been sent to an old address, and then suddenly they've never received this information, and then one day they get pulled over by the police, and it's like, you're driving illegally because your license has been suspended. These types of situations that people can get in, and we know that many people are living by the penny. People used to say by the pound, but now it's literally by the penny. With the cost of inflation, the cost of living, we're talking about people who count every single penny that they have. And then to add an extra expense on top of that, which could be, a £20 payment a month to repay DWP, which is what some of these payments are, could literally tip people over the edge,
Mhm.
especially as the cost of living still continues to rise. My rent's just gone up. You know what I mean? I, all these type of situations happen, and we have people who, speaking of rent, my rent only went up by £50. I'm very lucky. It's only 3 or 4% of my rent because I live in London. The last flat I lived at, they tried to put it by £200. This is what's happening in people's lives all over the place. And then to add another expense on top of that, paying WD pack, just, I'm sorry, but let it go. Go after the actual full blown criminals when it comes to this, because
Yeah.
that's not what most of these people are. It's mostly accidental benefit fraud,
Mm.
which is a
And
weird thing to say in one line.
the element of allowing government to take money directly from people's bank accounts. I mean, I might be mistaken, but isn't that what the Conservatives were planning to do? Like, it feels like a very I mean, would we expect anything less from Keir Starmer's Labour? But it feels like a Conservative policy. We're going to go after the people on benefits. We're going to, and if they don't pay up, we're going to go into their bank accounts to take the money direct, or we're going to stop them from driving. It just feels cruel.
Yeah. And why don't we go after the people who actually owe money in lots of different circumstances, right? And this isn't the typical lefty, oh, let's tax the rich, all this type of stuff. But there are genuine cases out there where people are evading tax in lots of sneaky little ways, which I'm sure many are legal, but we know many aren't. Look what happened to the former chancellor. What was his name? The founder of YouGov. He was chancellor for like 2 days under Liz Truss. Boris Johnson. Someone will tell me. Someone will tell
Nadeem
me in the comments.
Zahawi?
Was it Nadeem?
Oh,
I don't
was
know.
it? I can't remember. There was that. We went through that many cabinet ministers in that period of time.
I literally can't keep up. Someone will correct us in the comments very
I'll see
quickly,
it
I'm
in the
sure.
chat, yeah.
But he went through that battle, didn't he?
Kwasi Kwarteng, was it him?
Was it Kwasi? No, Kwasi.
No, he was
Liz
Liz Truss, wasn't he? Yeah.
There's so many. Anyway, I remember. Do you remember the specific case? He owed millions to the tax revenue service, which I'm now forgetting the official name, HMRC. And this was hidden from us, and he was an elected politician. There are other situations where there's so much more money to be recovered in different places that they should be putting their efforts more towards that. And you know what? Despite any criticism that I gave this person on the last show, Joe Biden did this in the US. He actually funded the IRS to such a significant point that they had enough resources to go ahead and recover billions off of people who were evading tax. And I know their tax system is different, but this is what we should be focusing on. There are people out there who owe a lot of money, who are very wealthy, very powerful, and very sneaky. Let's focus on those people.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't have put it better myself, Lewis. Speaking of Joe Biden, let's move on to the US. So it's been an explosive few days since Trump returned to the White House with executive orders that remove the USA from the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement again, and one which declares that there are only two genders, effectively denying the existence of many trans and non-binary people in the US. We've seen him give pardons to domestic terrorists, including the leaders of the Proud Boys, and we've seen him stand by in silence while Elon Musk performs not one, but two Nazi salutes. Earlier this week, however, the president was forced to listen to a brilliant sermon by the Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Budde, the bishop at Washington National Cathedral. Although many Republicans seemed unhappy with what she had to say, with one US representative even calling for her to be deported as a result. So what did she say? Let's take a look.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land. May God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love, and walk humbly with each other and our God for the good of all people in this nation and the world.
Now, I don't know about you, but I thought her sermon was compelling, smart, highly appropriate in the current climate, on message with the teachings of Jesus, and I thought her tone was calm and collected. Trump, on the other hand, disagrees. Taking to Truth Social, he said, "The so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left, hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. She failed to mention the large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology." So-called Christians angry that a bishop gave a sermon. Really? On its own, it's bad enough, but couple that with the way in which the US media have been covering Trump's first few days, more specifically the things they've left out, Trump's determination to, quote, "take back the Panama Canal," and this terrifying moment from Elon Musk earlier this week that I'm sure you've all seen by now. I can't help but worry that we're walking headfirst into the 1930s all over again. Lewis, what on earth is going on in the USA?
It is, there are so many moments in the past where you can make light and make fun of these moments, and I'm going to take the opportunity to do one now and begin with, and then move on to the more serious stuff. The first thing that you mentioned about the Two Genders Act, I don't know if anybody caught this, but actually the way they worded the executive order means that all people in the US are now women. They worded it in a way which was that if you are a male born, you are assigned the gender of the person who produced you, as opposed to the gender that you were produced into. So now, technically, because he still hasn't rescinded or edited the executive order, from here forth, all people in America are now female, and Trump is the first female president of the United States.
Does that make him the first trans president of the United States as well?
Yeah, because technically he's also now changed his gender. Yeah, he must do, because he's now changed his gender and changed half the population's gender. But again, onto the more serious stuff. I'm a little bit in shock because we knew that things were going to be bad. We knew the direction things were going to go in. He even said some of the stuff that was going to happen beforehand, but some of the stuff that they've done has gone so much further than people actually expected. Now, I'm glad they, what's their official title? Reverend Bishop?
She's technically a bishop. Yeah.
Religious leader.
Right, Reverend.
I watched that moment when it first happened, and obviously I feel like if Trump does descend into true far-right ideology, meaning just going beyond deporting people, putting people in humane conditions, and heaven forbid using military action against immigrants, when we look back in history, I think that specific moment will be used a lot. The warning that she essentially gave to the nation, but also while looking him in the eyes and asking for mercy, because we all knew what were coming. Because a lot of the times in the past, when certain people get elected in, we know kind of who they are, but we don't really know how far they're willing to go. But we know the rhetoric that this person has put out since he walked down that golden escalator back in 2016 or 15. And again, this is going to go down in history, not just the entire thing, but that specific speech. But to get onto the specific executive orders, which range from so many crazy and deranged things, and I will come on to Elon in a moment. There was another one that didn't get mentioned, but it's fine because there's been so much news. But he also rescinded the Equal Employment Act, which was an executive order which was signed in the civil rights era. This is how far we're going back. This mission to eliminate DEI, this idea, this notion that they're perpetuating, that certain people, usually they're pointing this towards people of like an ethnic minority, but they obviously use this for women as well, as we saw during the California fires, where everybody was attacking the lesbian female fire brigade leader, and they were saying she was a DEI hire, and that's why everything is so bad. Is by rescinding that act, a civil rights era executive order is just insane. It's going beyond just targeting DEI. It specifically protects people from being discriminated against when they're employed. That's beyond going against DEI. The act itself didn't technically really do anything other than say it was illegal. There's no way to enforce it by any specific stance, but obviously it gives a person more legal standing to say that they were discriminated against through, I don't know, perhaps a history of being passed over for promotions, or a certain workplace being heavily dominated by males or white people and stuff like that. So we're going back to the civil rights era. We're literally going to the Jim Crow era. We're going to segregation. We're going back to people, not having the rights that they now have, and people should be absolutely terrified. I will come to Elon in a moment, but I'll let you go for a moment because that was a bit of a rant.
No, well, to be fair, I was going to come to Elon now, actually, because that's the other scary thing. And obviously, we all saw the very obvious Nazi salute that he delivered in front of a crowd full of people the other day. What's frightening me is the level of gaslighting that we're now seeing, but not only from Elon, from Trump and those around him, and in the top team, but from normal voters, from normal voters, from certainly MAGA voters, but so many people right now are saying, but it wasn't that. He was giving his heart out to people. There's literally a video of him walking out on stage, going like this and like that, and saying, I give you my love. So he knows how to do I give you my heart gesture, right? And it's not a Nazi salute. That clearly was. But the other thing that's frightening me is the number of people that are sharing all the, and I was going to put the video in, but I didn't in the end, but all these people who are sharing all these still images of Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama and and Liz Cheney and other people allegedly doing the same thing. But then when you watch the video, the talking, the deliberating. I know that you've been tagged in numerous TikTok videos about this same issue, Lewis, and it's just like, is it gaslighting, or am I actually going mad? Because if it's gaslighting, it is working, because I do feel like I'm going insane with some of what people are saying about this.
This could be blamed as an awkward gesture if it was literally anyone else but Elon Musk. I've seen videos in the past where people have accidentally realized that they're stood in this salute. Like, there's funny videos out there of this. This is not one of those instances. The reason why we're being gaslit is because people are forgetting the history of Elon Musk. This is the man in 2022, during his early days of owning Twitter. He lost half of his advertisers because of how much neo-Nazi content was on their platform, and all the advertisers were getting sent messages from their consumers saying, why is Coca-Cola being advertised next to neo-Nazi content? And that eventually led to a boycott against Twitter, where they lost half of their advertisers. Elon Musk has repeatedly and consistently posted neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, white supremacist, white power. God, this is going to get demonetized now. All the keywords are in there. He's consistently posted this for years. It is well documented. And the one thing that's frustrated me out of all of this, but is absolutely expected, is that the Anti-Defamation League, which are essentially a pro-Israeli lobby who basically just throw around anti-Semitism all across the place. They do genuine work against actual anti-Semitism and hate. They came out and said that, Elon's just done an awkward gesture. The most frustrating thing about that is that people are forgetting that, coming back to Trump, that he just pardoned the 1,500 or so January 6th insurrectionists, the most famous one being Enrico Taro, I had his name here, doesn't matter, who was he got the harshest sentence. He got 22 years in prison for the conspiracy of seditious insurrection or whatever it was at the Capitol. 22 years. This guy has been pictured doing white power gestures multiple times, and the Anti-Defamation League actually categorized the Proud Boys as a white supremacist group, and also the symbols that they use, because some of the gestures are a little bit more niche and coded. There's one called the OK symbol, which you can look up if you want to, and then there's a picture of Enrico Taro doing this symbol. And they said the Anti-Defamation League said this is a hate symbol. This is a white power symbol. And at the same time, you've got Elon Musk doing the Nazi salute. You've got Trump pardoning literal white supremacists and white power nationalists from prison, and years of history of Donald Trump, having dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Nick Fuentes, an actual neo-Nazi. That same dinner, Kanye West was there at the height of him talking about Hitler and talking about Germany and praising Hitler, where Elon Musk actually suspended him from Twitter. That's how bad it was. That Elon Musk suspended Kanye West from Twitter for being too much of a white supremacist. All of these people are associated with each other. So the gaslighting is completely unreal. It truly is.
It's insane, and it's a frightening start of what is to come, I think. Stay here with me, Lewis. I'm just going to, before we move on to our final story, because it's quite a hard-hitting one, and I would like to spend some time on it. But before we move on to that, let's go to some of your comments. Let's see what you guys have been saying. As always, if you've got something to say, then feel free to go for it. Zeke the Beast has gifted 20 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much for that,
Thank
Zeke.
you, Zeke.
Really appreciated that. Hype Train Choo Choo. Thanks, Zeke. Let's see. So even with Elon Musk doing what is definitely a Nazi salute, I'm still more worried about Trump's negative effect on climate/environmental issues than his effect in civil liberties. Yeah, I mean, it came as no surprise to any of us. I think that one of the executive orders that he signed the other day was to withdraw again from the Paris Climate Agreement. It's very concerning, especially when we've just seen the insane wildfires that have happened. And let's not forget, while the wildfires were going on in California, in the central states, they were under feet of snow from extreme cold weather. Climate change isn't going away, and the fact that the president is essentially a climate denier is certainly a cause for concern.
Yeah, and just to add one thing as well, like Americans are just absolutely shooting themselves in the foot. This idea of like wanting to beat China and people voting for Donald Trump to strengthen the economy. Yeah, he might do it short term, maybe, probably not from the analysis. But China just recently started selling more electric cars than they did any other type of powered car. China is setting itself up for so much success in the future. To dominate the market, dominate the world in terms of green energy, in terms of their infrastructure. They're going to be completely energy independent. They're going to have such a powerful infrastructure when everyone's got access to electric cars, and a green electric grid, and they're going to be ready to absolutely attract so much more investment in the future. And America's just getting dragged behind by this idea of drill baby drill. Americans do not realize how much they are shooting themselves in the foot, because as I think Cogs brought this up before quite a bit in the past, the longer that you leave it to mitigate, and the longer you leave it to, transform what you need to transform and replace your infrastructure, the more it's going to cost. Because the bill right now for the US is in like the literal tens of trillions. And I can't even imagine what it'll be further down the line in 2040, 2050, when there's constant extreme weather, and then people might finally wake up. But at that point, the extreme weather could be disturbing economies so much that it'll be too late to invest and to make this change that they need to make.
And unfortunately as well is that we've got people in the UK like Farage, who we'll come on to talk about a little bit later, who are inspired by this, and who are talking about if they ever get close to power, and it is their desire to, they're going to slash net zero commitments and get rid of all that as well. I noticed Farage chuckling away when Adrian Ramsey was asking a question about climate change in PMQs this week. Nigel Farage is sat behind him with a look on his face as if to say, "Oh, here we go, talking about net zero again." And it's like, yeah, because it's fucking important. That's why
it's important. But Adrian Ramsey set himself up to fail there. Maybe somebody else. Maybe somebody else should have asked the question.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Graham, I'm surprised that her sermon wasn't vetted by Trump's team ahead of time. To be completely honest, I am actually. But what's interesting about that is that what I really, really love about it is that she knew she had a moment when she had a captive audience. They couldn't stand up and shout at her. They couldn't call out. They couldn't interrupt. They couldn't silence her. when else are you going to get an opportunity to deliver a speech like that in front of Donald Trump and force him to listen?
Well, just to add in one more thing as well, speaking of preachers, I don't know if anybody watched the full inauguration, but they brought out different types of religious leaders, from a Catholic priest to a rabbi, and they brought out I'm not sure what the correct term is, but like kind of like America, like African American kind of gospel kind of preacher, the stereotypical kind, the one who's very passionate and very energetic.
Yeah.
And it turns out, as soon as he was finished with that and he started going viral, he posted a video online asking everybody to buy his cryptocurrency.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Don't know if anybody
I'm
saw
sure.
that.
I didn't. Katie, hi again. Benefit fraud is only a tiny fraction of the benefits budget. Cracking down on benefit fraud is a distraction tactic for the right wing, while Kendall and Reeves come after people like me. Exactly, and that's what my concern is about this bill, is that it is a distraction tactic. They are trying to appease the right wing. They're trying to appease the people who aren't going to vote for them and are going to vote reform. They're trying to appease the voters who are angry at them because they've gone after pensioners and because they've gone after the farmers. So now they're saying, okay, well, we'll go after the benefit scroungers now instead.
Also, as well, just to give Labour, just some advice if anybody's watching this, Morgan McSweeney, if you actually want to win over some voters, a good tactic would be to actually go after MPs and what they're spending on. Now, there's always a lot of discourse around, certain MPs spending so much money, and some of it requires some nuance. Some people do have to fly up to the north of Scotland, and they have, costs into the hundreds of thousands after one parliament. That's fair. They need to get back and forth from their constituencies. However, the fact that we know that people will go to Parliament on Wednesday, perhaps, or any other day, and they have subsidised food inside of Parliament, which, by the way, I'm not against them having subsidised meals, right? What I'm against is then them walking across the road and then going to quite an expensive restaurant for lunch. If you have the facilities for a subsidised meal within Parliament, which is cheaper to the taxpayer, they should be using these facilities. If Starmer really wanted to be grabbing headlines, going after what MPs are spending on, even though it wouldn't really save that much money, it would be really good PR. There's no reason why they should be spending this much money on eating out at these expensive meals, and putting some restrictions on when and how MPs can spend money and claim it back would probably win him some brownie points. It's very simple. But no, let's go after the benefit fraud.
It's always the way, but thank you. Thanks again for all of you for your comments there. We've got one more. Andy, my friend was overpaid by the DWP, tried to pay it back and they refused, only to send them a massive bill the following month. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me at all. Do we have any more, or was that... I think we'll call it there. Perfect. Yeah, thanks again. Please keep commenting. And if you're watching this, if you're watching this after the fact, then feel free to leave us a comment and let us know what you think of today's stories. Now, before we move on, I just want to inform viewers that our final story this evening may be distressing. Southport killer Alex... You know what? Fuck him. I don't even care if I fuck his name up. He's an arsehole. Southport killer Axel Rudakabana has been sentenced this afternoon in Liverpool Crown Court to a minimum of 52 years for the murder of 3 young girls and the attempted murder of 10 others in July of last year. As you can tell, I'm already fumbling my words with this because I have been following the events of today very closely, and what happens in July is just so unthinkable and so horrendous that it makes me livid even starting to talk about it. So please bear with me on this one. Alongside the murder of the 3 girls, he also admitted to producing ricin, possessing terrorist material as well. And due to him being under 18 at the time of the attack, he automatically avoided what is known as a whole life term. However, the judge said that it is highly likely he will never be released from prison after issuing the 52-year sentence. 7-year-old Elsie Standcombe, 9-year-old Alice De Silva Agua, and 6-year-old BB King were stabbed to death last summer while attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. Now, the far right, Nigel Farage and many others, are still using this horrific event to score political points and accuse Starmer of a cover-up. And we will talk about this and some of the things that were made public about this case earlier in a moment. However, I find it very unsettling that so many people feel they can politicize this issue without showing any form of empathy for the families of those 3 girls or the survivors. So before we discuss this, I just want to take a moment to share some of the statements made in court this afternoon. Please note what I am about to read will be distressing. A statement read by Alice's parents said, "Alice was always very kind. A world of possibilities awaited her. She was a beautiful girl. She was a strong and confident preteen with a world of dreams. That summer's day, she was so excited to go to the dance workshop. And in a matter of minutes, our lives were shattered and turned upside down. We kept up hope every second of her 14-hour fight, but when she lost her fight, we lost our lives. It shattered our souls. It feels like we're stuck in a 5D horror movie with moving pictures and moments being relived. We can't get out. Some moments are easier than others, but every day is the same. Alice is not here when we wake up, and she never will be. There's a sense of loss of foundation too. Alice was our purpose for living. So what do we do now?" Jenny Stancombe, mother to Elsie, also made a statement in court. She said, "We are not going to stand here and list everything you have taken away from us because we refuse to give you the satisfaction of hearing it. We will not let you know anything about her because you don't deserve to know the extraordinary person that she was. You know what you have done, and we hope the weight of that knowledge haunts you every single day. What you did was not only cruel and pure evil, it was the act of a coward. Though you have stolen our daughter from us, you will not take away our determination to honour her memory. We will carry her love, positivity, and her legacy forward, no matter how much pain you have caused." Now, the father of a 9-year-old girl who survived the attack asked her to explain the impact that this event had had on her life. And one thing she said really stuck with me when I read it this afternoon. She said, "When people in school asked me, 'Do you wish you weren't there that day?' I said that in some ways I wish I wasn't. But also, if I wasn't there, someone else would have been stabbed and they could have died. So I'm glad I might have stopped someone else getting hurt." These are the words of a 9-year-old. No child should ever have to have thoughts like this. Now, Lewis, we'll come on to the politics and the fallout in just a moment, but I just wanted to ask you what your initial reaction is to the sentencing and the evidence and statements that we heard in court this afternoon.
Yeah, having watched the full sentencing, it seemed to me that the judge was trying to do, I believe, from my interpretation, everything he could to squeeze as much time into that sentence as he could within the limits that he was allowed. There's no point going too much into the particulars of him pleading guilty and that how affects it, but I think it was very relevant if anybody did watch the sentencing, which was very hard because they went through all the details, that he specified that under the condition of the sentence, because there's been a bit of misunderstanding about how he's been sentenced. People are saying he's only got 52 years. That's what a lot of the headlines said. Some of them were a little bit more specific and said, oh, he got for at least 52 years. It's not how it works. And the judge explained it quite well, but they didn't use his words exactly. He has been given essentially a whole life sentence. That's just not the words that have been used. He has to serve a minimum term of 52 years, and it'll be up to the parole board when he's at the age of 70 if he'd be allowed out again. But due to his conditions and his state and his lack of remorse and his behavior in court, which is probably just going to continue in prison, he'll likely never get out. And that's what the sentence that the judge gave him allowed. So hopefully this person will never, ever get out of prison. And hopefully at some point he'll be able to fully feel what he did. And I hope that does happen at some point, because he deserves to bear the pain that he's caused.
100%.
Sorry,
Go
go
on.
ahead. I was going to say with the victims and the families, some of this, again, I was just watching it so closely, so it's just all in my head. There were a couple of young girls who were in the courtroom as well, who did obviously get up and say their statements. Some of the statements that we were just reading out are like from before. Some of them are from during the court session. They didn't have to do that. It wasn't necessary, meaning it wasn't going to affect the outcome of the case. They chose and pushed to be allowed to make a statement in court. And I feel like that's very brave. And I feel like that should be commended in these circumstances, because they were allowed to do that, which hopefully in some level will give them, I won't use the word closure, but just a level of healing, perhaps, that they were able to face this person who've caused them and their friends and their community so much trauma, that it may be helpful in at some point being able to go back to living a normal life, if that ever happens.
Yeah, I think it's been a very difficult day in court for many, the friends, the families, the victims, the survivors, and for many in the press, the journalists that have had to sit through everything. I know that the families got up and left the courtroom for a short period while the judge was going over the quite graphic detail of what took place. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, because it is truly horrific. But I wanted to just read some of the statements that that I've just read.
Absolutely.
Just because I think that, like I say, we're going to move on to the politics of it in a moment, and we're going to have that conversation. But I think all too often people are really quick to have that conversation, that they forget that this has had a real impact on real people, and a community is still mourning, and probably will be for a long time. When it comes to the and just on that, I completely understand to some of our viewers, who are unable to watch this segment and listen to this. I know that I think a few people have had to leave, and I totally understand that. But I do think it's important that we still talk about this. So if anyone is affected by this story, we will not be offended at all if you need to jump ship. As far as the sentencing is concerned, like you say, my understanding is it's a minimum of 52 years, and then, like you say, the parole board can then decide if they want to consider him for any release after that. But it's also my understanding that his sentence has already been put forward for review for potentially being unduly lenient. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, because my understanding is that this is probably one of the longest sentences handed out to anyone, particularly of that age, ever.
I'm not too sure on like the legal side of things. I definitely think there needs to be some room in terms of these cases where discretion can be given more to the judge. He expressed in his sentencing that I can't remember the exact wording, but about how he thinks it should be deemed a terrorist act. But as he's described by the legislation, as it's designed, they can't define it that way. So it's almost the judge expressing his frustration in that. And again, that's nobody's fault who's currently operating in the system. It's obviously the fault of when the legislation was created. I think it was the Terrorism Act 2000. It's defined very specifically that people need to have particular motives, particular ideologies, which again, to smash some misinformation, there was no particular ideology found. And just to touch on that very quickly, if I can, a lot of Am I skipping ahead? Am I skipping
No,
ahead?
no. Well, no, it's fine because I do want to ask you about that. So obviously, it appears that there were many failures from the authority. Rudy Cabana was known to social services. He'd been referred to prevent.
Yeah.
He had a history of violence, and had even been suspended from school because of this behaviour. So I wanted to ask you, and you can talk about more about what we learned in court as well. But do you think that more could have been done to prevent this attack?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. This could have, you can't ever say determinatively like this could have 100% been prevented, because we could live in a ideal world where everybody has all the resources they need and have all the resources thrown at them when they either reach out for help, which he did, or when people recognize that a person needs help, which they did multiple times. And this could have still happened. Who knows? What we do know is that there were multiple failures, and there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation out there about this case, obviously starting with, which we'll move on to a bit later, about the misinformation about who this person was when it first happened. Obviously, we all know that Ali Al Shakati was like a made up name. That's not who this person was. This person didn't come over on a boat a few months ago before the attack. This person was born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents who were Tutsi, and they escaped the genocide which affected the Tutsis in Rwanda. We know that he had his family had a background of just pretty much working all their life. There's not much reporting on about anything that's been found out about the parents, because often in these cases as well, what you'll find is, when it comes to the big psycho killer cases, not to put it in that category, it'll be like, oh, perhaps there was abuse or something very traumatic happened specifically, but they haven't really been able to identify anything like that to do with his family side of things. Because obviously, when we come onto the politics, the whole who he is and his identity was obviously highly politicized. But sticking with like the facts of the case, is that it was found that he first reached out to help in around 2019. He rang Childline, and he said that he wanted to go into a school and use a knife to kill people. He did that anonymously, but it did say that Childline referred him to the police, and the police did actually make an engagement with him. I believe they went to his home. And this is, I'm assuming, because the timeline is still not completely clear, probably the first time that he got put through to the Prevent program. There were 3 times he got put into the Prevent program from 2019 to 2021. That's 3 opportunities right there. We have obviously information about his expression in school of loving Hitler, loving certain fascists and murderers, his obsession with genocides all across the political spectrum. And of course, there was the famous bit of information that came out sometime later about the Al-Qaeda manual that was found in his home. That, annoyingly, I think was reported on and released incorrectly. They should have gone a bit further when they chose to release that information, because now we only just found out this week that in fact it wasn't just an Al-Qaeda manual. He was researching the IRA. He was researching, again, Hitler. He was researching and showed an obsession with multiple atrocities, multiple evil people from across history, from all the way back to Genghis Khan. This was all found on the 3 laptops that they found in his home, along with, of course, ricing as well, which he was trying to develop. I think, if I remember correctly, he didn't actually fully develop it, but he was getting very close to whatever the word is, like correctly producing it. So again, this idea of what his motivations were and any particular ideology, they could not define it, because there was no specific ideology at all that they could find. And obviously, more interestingly, with the attack, obviously it was talked about so much in court about how he went after women and girls, and that is agreed upon that was his target. However, what they found in terms of his background is that there wasn't really any incel-y kind of behavior there. So I just think we might never know why he did what he did, which is terrible, because it probably adds to the closure, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, of families, of victims, of the community, because this is just going to go unknown. But again, there is no specific ideology of this person, and that's now being revealed very clearly in court.
I thought it was interesting that the judge said that the when I can't remember the exact wording, but the talk around using this word terrorism, he said it misses the point of it's like it's almost as if it doesn't even that underplays what it was that he did. I mean, some of these girls were stabbed over 100 times
Yeah.
each. Like the horrors of the detail of this case, they're beyond anything that I think we've seen in this country when it comes to attacks in terms of the violent level of it. Yeah, it's
But
been
I,
it's been a
but
day for that. Go on.
I would encourage people not to look at the gory side of the case. The
Yeah.
information is there, it's in the public record now. The parents have specifically asked for the media not to share the specific gory details as a request. They don't have to, of course.
No.
Unfortunately, what happened as soon after the trial is that I think it was the Merseyside police put out a statement saying, we've already told people do not share the gory stuff. It's a request from the parents, because so many people on platforms like X were sharing the gory details. And many of which were, again, politicizing it.
Well,
We should
yeah,
respect the
no,
parents' wishes.
100%. And on the topic of politicizing it, in his usual style of a tragedy into a political football, Reform leader Nigel Farage has this afternoon written to Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner to request that she apologise. In the letter to the Deputy PM, Mr Farage said, as you no doubt will be aware, Axel Rudikabana, the suspect in the horrific murders in Southport, has pled guilty to all charges put to him, including under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Additionally, we know now that the Prime Minister was made aware of Mr Rudikabana's terror links, but decided to conceal this information from the public. Shortly after the brutal attack, I questioned whether the public was being told the truth and whether this was in fact a terror incident, even when the police stated that it wasn't. I stated, I just wonder whether the truth is being withheld from us. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a fair and legitimate question. What I do know is that something is going horribly wrong in our once beautiful country. In response to my comments, you stated that he, Nigel Farage, must understand that you have a level of responsibility. You're a community leader, you're elected to represent your constituency, and therefore you have a level of responsibility with that. And it's not to stoke up what conspiracy theories or what you think might have happened or lean into what you think. Farage goes on to say, I'm writing to ask you to apologise, not to me, but to the millions of Britons that you deliberately misled in choosing such an inappropriate moment to spread misinformation, by choosing to make such nakedly political points at a time of national vulnerability. You undoubtedly contributed to the civil unrest that ensued. As Deputy Prime Minister of this country, you have a duty to respond responsibly and not, ironically, create fake news by criticising others for stirring up fake news when they have done no such thing. I've no doubt that you would like to take this opportunity to correct the record. Is he taking the piss? By choosing to make such nakedly political points at a time of national vulnerability, you undoubtedly contributed to the civil unrest that ensued. Seriously, says the man who uses every national vulnerability to score political points. Farage said that he suspected Rudikabana was known to the authorities. Now, we know that that was the case. We do now know that. But Mr. Justice Goose said this afternoon that he himself, the judge, must accept that there was no evidence that Rudikabana had any terrorist cause, but added that his culpability is equivalent to terrorist matters, whatever its purpose. Now, Lewis, Farage talks a lot about cover-ups. Richard Tice this evening also labelled the Southport attacks the mother of all cover-ups. Do you think Farage has been vindicated, as he might like to think? And what do you make of his suggestion that Angela Rayner contributed to the riots that we saw in the summer?
Absolutely, he's not vindicated at all one bit, and he's just continuing to politicize this. And do you know what? It just absolutely fucking pisses me off so much, because this is
You and
not
me
about
both.
him. Oh, what was that?
I'm just saying, you and me both.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted or something. Then it absolutely pisses me off. This is not about him. This is not about his ideology. This is not about immigration. This is not about race. This is about a young boy who has been radicalized through whatever purpose, which we still need to yet discover. Because again, there's no clear political motivation. And I do want to reiterate that there are multiple times where he was again referred to prevent 3 times. His parents actually had to call the police multiple times on their own child. So, a lot of people are trying to attack the parents on this. Maybe there's something deeper there. We don't know that. What we do know is that they called the police on their own child multiple times for his behavior. That after, he said he wanted to unalive people. God, get off of TikTok, Lewis. He wanted to kill people and get revenge on people who bullied him and all of this, that nothing further was done. Because when you go through the Prevent program, which, by the way, the Conservatives did a report into the Prevent program and its failures and didn't act on it. So some blame goes to them as well. The blame goes to everyone, by the way. I'm not trying to politicize this myself. I want to share the blame across the board because there are multiple failures. How is it that we can have a situation like this where this young man can reach out to help? And again, I'm not trying to humanize this person because he's done horrible things. I am trying to advocate for what we can do in the future to prevent these victims, because there are failures. But he reached out to Childline when he was 15 years old and said he wanted to do bad things to people. And that should have been it. That should have been the moment where every resource is thrown at this child to get him in a better position. People are obviously talking about his autism. Obviously, it's a factor to be considered. It is not determinative of his actions in any way. When it comes to obviously his mental health, something changed in this boy. We don't know what, we don't know when, we don't know how. What we do know is that one of his former teachers said, obviously at one point he was a great student. He got Star of the Week or whatever, and all these types of things. And then from a certain age, he just literally changed. He said he was getting bullied. And again, none of these are excuses. I'm not making any excuses. I'm just laying out the reality of what happened to this person to potentially contribute to the factors, and the fact that he reached out multiple times. None of these are excuses. More should have been done. The police knew about him, the school knew about him, and it is a failure of so many levels of authority. This could have been prevented. I'm not saying would have, I'm saying it could have been prevented.
And because of that, understandably, a lot of people are very angry. But many people, including people who turned up outside the court today and caused some bother, and I'm sure you'll come on to that in a moment as well, they say that, well, it's just a cover-up. It's been a deliberate cover-up and that we should have known about it, which is what Farage is saying. Now, obviously, Starmer claims there was no cover-up. He just couldn't release the information that he had due to potentially being in contempt of court. And I reckon that's a pretty reasonable excuse, no?
Yep. If they would have gone to his house and they would have found very clear of intention relating to one specific ideology, so if he was an Islamic extremist, and they found that he's like signed his heart or soul to ISIS or whatever it might be, they could have released that information. They didn't. They couldn't release any information on particular motives because it would have affected the case, because he had no particular motive. So they were still trying to do discovery and try and find out more information about this person so they can prosecute him properly and also find where things went wrong. When it comes to the idea of, again, I mentioned it before, why this isn't defined as terrorism, I think it's terrorism. So does Keir Starmer, and they want to change the legislation, which I absolutely welcome, to make it a bit more open and not too specific. But the idea of a cover-up is just beyond ridiculous. What was Keir Starmer supposed to do when people were burning down hotels? Is he supposed to come out and be like, oh, by the way, we found an Al-Qaeda manual? Like, are you kidding me? Is that what they expect? And again, he was obsessed with all atrocities across the entire world. There is no specific ideology. So releasing any information immediately about his background would have then stoked more violence and more riots, because these idiots were out rioting in the name of 3 dead girls that they can't even name.
And what do you make of this claim? What do you make of this claim from Farage that Angela Rayner has got a part to play in those riots?
It's just constant political football. In terms of Nigel Farage's realm of ideology, in terms of whether it's obsessing over race or Islam and immigration, it doesn't cross any of these borders. What's very clear is that our services have been severely underfunded, and it's very possible that with more resources this could have been prevented. But even so, because the police were aware, and whoever takes takes care of Prevent and whoever takes care of these systems, they have failed. And now an inquiry has been called, which I absolutely welcome. And from some of the statements from the families today, they welcome as well. And they said it will help them find more justice and help them find more clarity on what's happened and where the failures were. But again, Nigel Farage is just politicizing this for his own sake. And it's very frustrating because these types of... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and people are lapping this up, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you told me before we came on air tonight about what happened outside the court as well, and the impact that's had.
One of the saddest parts of the day for me is that it's not about me, but you guys know what I mean, because it just wasn't well reported on. Is that after everything happened, all the sentencing, all that type of stuff, the victims' families were supposed to come out to the steps of the court in Liverpool and give their statements. They were cancelled because there were far-right protesters outside. So they couldn't even allow them to have that. And they were, saying that this is a cover-up and the media is lying and all of this type of stuff. So those people are there because of Tommy, because of Nigel, because they still believe this is a cover-up, giving absolutely no closure, even just for the day, to the families, just absolutely stealing their moment away from them, where, they've prepared this statement, they've probably practiced it, they've maybe rewrote it multiple times, and they were, probably got their mind ready to go out and speak in front of cameras to the nation on this atrocity, and that moment was taken away from them because of these far-right activists. There weren't that many there, but enough for the authorities to be like, yeah, we can't send you out there. It's absolutely disgusting. And this idea of, again, like going on the idea of a cover-up, there has been no cover-up. There's just failures. That's what there is. And I'm sorry, we criticize the Labour government. We criticize Keir Starmer a lot, all the time. I don't think Keir Starmer or the Labour Party have actually done anything wrong here at all. This idea of him calling these people out for far-right is something, and Angela Rayner stoking the far-right riots, absolutely not. They went on the street because they thought this was a migrant who arrived on a boat and his name was Ali Al-Shakati. Plenty of people spread this lie, including people from Katie Hopkins all the way to the Tommy Robinson types. All these types of people spread that lie because it fit their bias and it fit their ideology. And you know what they did? Remember, Callum, when we went to Downing Street, when I came to meet you a couple of days after, and we were like, let's go see the protest. Me and Callum happened to be in London. We got a notification on Twitter when we met up that the protesters, this was 2 or 3 days after the Southport attack, that they were outside Downing Street, and we said, let's go have a look, let's go check it out. They were there, pissed out of their head, bottles everywhere, crates of beer, no signs for these people, for these children, for these victims, no pictures of them or anything like that. They were just there to cause trouble, squaring up to the police, starting fights, getting arrested, and then they want to go on Twitter, go on the news and say two-tier policing, two-tier Keir. Go fuck yourself. This is not about you and your ideology. These people have absolutely distorted the real situation that we've got here. And we're not going to be able to make the change that we need as long as there's this proportion of the population dominating the news cycle, having TV shows on GB News, using their parliamentary privilege, publishing letters saying that there's a cover-up, relating it to immigration, relating it to race. It's absolutely fucking disgusting. And they are preventing change from happening. They absolutely are. And they should be utterly ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, Lewis, I think we're going to have to end it there, unless there's anything else that you want to touch on with this.
Yeah, just to add one more thing into all of this is that there were failures. We can't say that this could have never happened. It may have been prevented. It may not have. But there are failures that people need to be held responsible for, and we need to focus on those so we can make the change. We've made change in the past. We've successfully reduced types of crime, types of interventions, but it needs funding. It needs people to support it and people to get behind it. And we're not going to make the change while these people are out there lying, distorting, and misleading. So just make sure if, any of your friends, any of your family, may say something about this case which is untrue or wrong, you don't get angry at them. There's so much information out there being flooded in the zone. But just make sure that they know actually what happened, just for the sake of the family and the memory of the children that we've lost, and the memory of the children, not the memory, the future of the children who have got to continue in their lives after going through this. And if I can add one more tiny thing, just on the politics side of it.
Yeah.
Elon Musk owns a platform which is now dominated by neo-Nazis who are radicalizing young people. We know from all the data how much this is rising on his platform. And Nigel Farage, again, was offering to receive £100 million fucking pounds off of this guy who is radicalizing our young people. We've got, this circle of people pardoning white supremacists who then, by the way, that white supremacist, Enrique Tarot, after he got released, he went on the Alex Jones podcast a few hours after. Alex Jones, who is funding Tommy Robinson. This circle of people are radicalizing our youth to such a dangerous point. The Prevent program, 19% is for the far right type of stuff, 11% is for Islamic terror and stuff like that, and Islamic extremism. It is on the rise. It is very dangerous. So let's just make sure we stay in reality, and all of our friends and family are staying in reality, because things are going to get worse. And I'm sorry to leave on that message, but they are. But the only way we can do it is by sticking together, making sure we put the truth out there, and fighting against it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lewis. Thanks for joining me today. Yeah, we are going to have to end it there. Thanks to all of you for watching. Don't forget, if you want to support us, you can do so by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, or by simply liking and sharing our videos. Thanks again, Lewis, for joining me this evening, and thanks again to all of you for watching. It's been a difficult show. It's been tough, but I think that it's important that when we approach topics like this, I think it's really important that, as well as discussing the politics and the the political side of these things, that we do also take a moment to remember the victims and the survivors, because that's what it comes down to. These are real people, real children, and real families who have to live with this. We might, we can end this stream now. We can watch the telly. We can go about our evenings. But for them, this is their life, and I just think that it's important we acknowledge them, and we give them the respect that they deserve as well. So thank you. We'll be back on Saturday for the debrief, where we will have an exciting announcement. So stay tuned for that one. But until then, thanks for joining. I'm Callum, aka Political, and I wish you all a wonderful evening. Good night.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.